Welcome back to our third and final installment for the Darth Vader, Hot Toys Darth Vader Episode 4 Update, Upgrade and Modification series. We will be starting with the paint jobs we have to do so that has a chance to dry. We'll also be making some slight modifications to the costume. Well, let's just dive right in. Again, as you might have seen in my first video, here is the episode 4 costumes book that I use as a reference. And as you can see, we need to weather the boxes, the belt, and the chest box as well. You can even see it more clearly here. And let's make a note of how Darth Vader should be dressed. This is another thing that really can make or break your figure. Coming out of the box from Hot Toys, everything is sitting way too low, far apart. The belt boxes should be very close to the belt buckle. So move everything very close together in a tight group. That is just something that really helps sell the figure more, make it look more accurate. Here's a shot of the very first scene in A New Hope, where you can see everything is also very tightly grouped. Okay, so you can either use the black that I suggest for a lot of things, really. Or in this case, for the hands, I suggest getting the matte varnish from Vallejo. That really helps dull down the shiny gloves to match better with the rest of the gauntlet and the rest of the figure. So let's start with that. I also got my favorite metal color, the 724 silver color from Vallejo that we'll be using for the paint chipping. First, the matte varnish, and let's do the glove that is on the figure, the one from the previous video where we did the electronics. Luckily this is acrylic paint and it'll dry really quickly while we work on all the other things that need to be done for this figure. So by the time we get back to this, it's perfectly dry and usable. One of the reasons I like using the acrylics. Okay, let that dry. And off camera I'll be doing all the other hands as well. You can do the same. No need to watch me. No need to watch paint dry. So this is a partially dried hand that has been treated with a matte paint, and next to it you can see the very shiny untreated hand. Look at that crazy plastic shine compared to the flat, much more leathery look. Okay, so now that we've flattened this hand down and already mounted the rest of the gauntlet in video 2, as you might remember, I'm going to be using some very strong double-sided tape that will help me to get that darned thing sitting flush. Alright, make sure we get the hand placement correct, right over the knuckles, and make sure it sits flush and round. And as you can see, that already looks a lot better, almost believable, because it really sits tight around the hand just like we want on a normal glove, and it helps that the hands are no longer the shiny plastic. So zooming out, yeah, that's going to look fine, especially once you're totally posed up with the cape and everything around it. That's perfect. See? That looks almost like a full glove. People not in the know would probably not know, not see that it's a hand and a gauntlet separated. So I'm happy. Okay, next up, my trusty metal color for the paint chipping. This was such a obvious and easy score for Hot Toys, since they are pretty good at that sort of thing. I really have to wonder why they didn't for this figure, because all the movie stills, all materials clearly show there's a lot of wear and tear on these boxes. I do think paint chipping is one of the things that really helps sell any figure, any plastic I should say, to be more metal. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Like that. Do this one, lightly dip it in and take most of it off again, so you can control the flow and the amount of paint. I feel I work best with the least amount of paint on my brush. Like always, a little goes a long way, less is more and all that crap. Fortune cookie pull. Once your brush is almost dry, use it to dry brush the raised edges on the belt boxes. Yeah, that looks better. Same goes for the area around the belt buckle, the black square around the belt buckle. Yep, that looks pretty good. Maybe enhance the corners a little bit. That's usually where you see most of the wear and tear. Yep, that's good. This thing is slightly harder to do because there's no sharp edges. It's all a bit, they're rounded, so make sure you follow a straight line and really use those sharp corners to do most of the work. I also like using them on the switches. Another thing I like to do to get a little bit more of a worn look is to use the TAMIYA Weathering Master B on the black of the chest box and the belt boxes to get a bit more of a smudgy look than the smooth black. It also works wonders to get a little bit more lived in look on, actually on most. As you can see on the switches, like someone's been pushing Vader's buttons. I also use a very small amount of the rust color just to get that black a little bit more lived in. Okay, so these are ridiculously flat and those should be almost shiny. So it's time for the polishing part. I got my trusty wireless Dremel again with the buffing wheel on it this time. You can get some Dremel buffing paste, but I like this stuff. I got it on eBay a long time ago. It's diamond paste. There's different grit, I guess. So I use that. So be sure to get the lowest RPM setting on your Dremel. Heat builds up really fast and plastic can bend very easily. So slow going, keep checking your progress, always keep the wheel moving. I like to apply the paste to the stuff that needs buffing. While we're at it, I'm also going to be applying a little bit more shine to Darth Vader's helmet. I want it to be uneven, so that'll make for a more accurate look. Yeah, that looks good. Still not perfectly shiny, which is not what we want. We want some sort of semi-gloss and a bit of unevenness, which is what this is, so good. By the way, in video 1 there was one important detail I forgot to address, which is another mistake in the paint job, because officially I've already mentioned the... Well, this is an interesting piece of history, because first off, they painted the original Darth Vader mask completely black, but then when they tried to photograph it, it just washed out and no detail appeared. So that's when they came up with the idea of the mixing of the gunmetal gray silver with the black. So this is the gunmetal silver, this is black, this is black, this is black, and here's the gunmetal silver, and this side also has the gunmetal silver. But another thing that is supposed to be black inside the gunmetal, and that is the underside of the eyebrows. So I'm getting my trusty black Vallejo paint and painting the underside of the eyebrows black, which will affect the way the eyes appear, and thus affect the way the mask looks. Another inaccuracy that needs addressing. I don't know, maybe it was just that's too hard to do in a production line to get those kind of details correct. There. To me it has the appearance of making the eyes look bigger. I'm also going to be touching up the top of the nose. That's supposed to be flat black, whereas this is supposed to be gunmetal. Do the side of the mask a little bit more in the flat black. Here's a good picture I found online where the light gray areas are the gunmetal and the dark gray areas are supposed to be black. So I hope it helps you guys, the guys doing the repaint, to get this proper. So one more close-up of my Darth Vader sculpt in a exaggerated light, so you can see the black gunmetal, black, and vice versa. The black here, the gunmetal here, the black underneath the eyebrows. People have been asking me about the eyes. I didn't paint the eyes, I just put some metallic film behind it, so in certain lighting situations you can see red coming through. Barely in this situation, but if I turn it towards the light maybe it'll show up. As you can see, it's just like the movie, only certain situations where you can see. So this is it. Look at that beautiful silhouette, that profile with the helmet sitting properly. Really cool. Okay, so there's a very small metal wire inside this thing, and it really doesn't do the job. The only job it should have is to make sure this falls straight down. To make it look believable, the actual suit was heavy wool, so that falls straight down, but what this does is it keeps coming back to its original form, which isn't a straight line. So we're going to be removing that, adding some heavier wire along the bottom to pull it down and make us enable us to shape the fabric. So let me introduce the hands of my wife. She's going to help us with the removal of the thin metal wire. It is fixed in two places on the left and the right side at the top. As you can see, go to the bottom of the robe and just take apart 2 stitches, and then you can access the bottom part of the wire. As you can see, there's the metal wire. Now it's separated from the top and the bottom, and you just pull it out. Alright, so you have to really pull on the 2 pieces of fabric, the satiny fabric and the cottony fabric, so you can see the seam and especially the stitching. Then just take out 2 stitches, and then you can find the metal wire. So there it is, and by only strategically removing the 2 stitches you won't have to sew anything back together. Okay, So now we need to decide the length of the thicker wire we're going to be running along the bottom of the robe. Take a little extra length because you need to make loops so you can fix them in the corners. I like to use the thick lead soldering tin because it's lead, it's heavy but very pliable, and that'll do the best job for what we need. Okay, so now we'll be creating a small loop at the end of our lead. Yes, so the thread has something to hold on to. In most cases you can use the same opening you've created to access the other wire you had to remove to insert this wire all along the bottom until you come out at the other end, and then you get very thin black thread. Thread the needle and just sew the corners through the loop in the lead so that doesn't go anywhere. Stick it through the fabric a few times, create a loop, and then go through the loop to create a little knot. Then find the loop in the lead, go through that again a couple of times to make sure the lead wire is secure. And then to tie it off, again in the corner, make a couple of very small knots. So finally you'll have some wire, some thread in the corner, and then thread that through the needle and push it back in so you have a blind seam. Okay, while you're working on one end, make sure you keep the other end open and just get a bit of the lead bent backwards so you don't lose that part while you're working on the other edge. When one corner is done, about the halfway point, it's a good idea to secure the lead along the bottom of the robe. So you have a total of 3 points that are connected. No need to do any more. Okay, so now we can trim back a little bit of the excess of the soldering lead. Create a loop, push that back in the seam, and then sew it shut. Fix it to a corner. Tie it off so it's attached to the fabric before you start sewing the lead loop into the corner. And then finally tie it off again. Good thing about tying everything off is that if necessary you can also sew back the 2 stitches you ripped out to get access to the thin wire at the beginning. By the way, to do that you get the seam ripper to gain access to the different stitches. One of the good things of having a wife, people, you have that sort of stuff.
Well, thank you.
And then finally just trim everything down, clean it up neatly, and voila. Beautiful. Thanks, sweetie. All right, it's time for some water treatment now. So I'm going to be putting on the robe and cape. I'm going to be putting that on the body, even though it's going to have to come off again for his vest and other stuff later. But the tunic is dropping down way more naturally, and I can literally sculpt it any way I want to, thanks to the metal wire in the bottom. So we're going to aid that process by getting some demineralized water. The demineralized water will make sure you won't get any bacteria or rust or anything in there. I've gotten my wife's little spray bottle, put the demineralized water in there so you can control where it goes, how much of it is going to be used. We do have a figure with some electronics, so we do want to be a little careful. Though it won't be easy to hurt anything real quick. But this is a great tip for any figure that has fabric parts. Just really get it wet. The weight of the water may allow you to shape it even more, and it will loosen everything up so that once everything is dry, it dries up in the new position. So a great tip for anything that gives you trouble futzing, just use the demineralized water and you can almost sculpt everything the way you want. See how it drops down beautifully and starts draping, which is another important aspect that we're looking for, a proper drape. So the resilient fabrics just need water to start looking like the heavy wool fabric that is used in the movie. Same for the cape, and now we just let that dry. Let the water evaporate naturally. And that'll look great. Heavy drape, I like that. Okay, so finally we come to the end of our list with the final part, which is the redressing and posing of the figure. This is the easiest but also one of the most important bits. And I suggest that anyone who's watching with a Darth Vader at least try this part. I'm going to be using some tape here and there, because tape is our friend. It is easily reversible, it's non-destructive, and it does help greatly with the posing and keeping everything where you want it. Especially during posing, a figure is being manhandled quite a bit. And so strategically placing a double-sided tape in certain locations will be both invisible but also invaluable. So I have 3 different pieces of tape I will be using for this, 3 different types I mean. This is the black tape, electrical tape, insulation tape. This is the thin double-sided tape I have, very strong, and this is a thicker double-sided tape that is best used for areas where you don't have a perfect fit and you need to bridge some gaps. One final thing to check before you start dressing is the thickness of these seams. It can hamper the look of the figure. I am using some special scissors that are for fabric, so very sharp. I'm going to be cutting back as much as I can without opening up the seam. This also helps to get out of the way of the arms you want to have go down. I must say the trimming on this thing is also better than some I've encountered. All right. This is also where I like to hide the wire by taping it on the back of one of the legs. Again, using the black tape will make sure it stays hidden. Leave a little bit of play here so you can still pose and bend what you want. So somebody asked me, from looking at video number 2, there's this pec chest area, and I just cut all the way through where the arms are supposed to go down on both sides. That won't hinder or hurt anything, and as you can see, even then making the arms go straight down is enough of a challenge after cutting down as much of the seams as possible and all the other stuff we've been doing. So yeah, here we go. After this, we get to the chest box. This is one of the pieces where I like to use some double-sided tape to get it exactly where I want it. I don't remove the backing just yet because we need to ascertain the proper position first, and we can't do that until at least the shoulder armor is on as well. These are very thin straps, and you don't want any unnecessary pressure on them. If they're closed, they're closed. That's good enough. Make sure they're nice and even horizontal. Then we get the cod piece. The most important thing to remember for this piece, this part of the costume, is that it needs to go up as high as it can. It should hide this entirely, and like we said, we want a tight group. If you remember looking at the pictures of the original costume, remember we're dealing with very thin strips of leather, so no unnecessary force. Now, because this is a new hope, we need to put in the shoulder armor now before the robe. And actually, this is also a part that could use a little bit of double-sided tape to keep it in check, keep it in place. Like I said, it's easily reversible, non-destructive. I want to use the thin tape for this because we don't want any extra padding. Make it go down as far as it can, and then press it down. Now let's remove the backing of the other double-sided tape for the chest box. Make sure it sits perfectly straight, as low as it will go, because we want it close to the shoulder armor but not touching. And this as high as it can go. That looks good. So, time for the robe. We'll also be using some double-sided tape here to make sure the robe stays where you want it to. The robe is already falling nice and straight, so our water treatment and the work we've been doing with the wires is paying off. Time to add the shin guards that have been slightly polished. Make sure they have the same position. They need to go about the crook of the boot, where the leg turns to a foot. Let's add the gauntlet and choose a hand. I like this hand because you can use it to grab the belt boxes, and you can do a force push or something dramatic like this. And if you want to go for the waiting for you Obi-Wan pose, you can hide it beneath the cape so it doesn't get in your way then. And again, for the double-sided tape inside the gauntlet part of the glove, get it as close to the edges as possible, because it's the edges that are the most critical to get right. Like so, and then get them over the knuckles and really press it down so it sits round and tight down on the knuckles. Yep, looks pretty good. Okay, so now we'll be threading the belt boxes through the back opening of the robe. Make sure you get the proper alignment because they're not interchangeable, they're mirror opposites of each other. You need to come out so that the green lights will come to the inside of the belt. Okay, so here are our belt boxes. Time to get the belt. Saber hook goes on the right side, his left, over the robe. But first, let's place the belt boxes. This is where our black tape also comes in handy. It's possible to tape them on almost invisibly and make sure they don't move again, and make sure they sit tight because this wire always pushes back, of course. Place it on the belt. Again, be careful, this is very thin material. With regards to placement, I don't know, it's a couple of mil, so that's what, 5-6 millimeters, so that's 1/5 of an inch. So to get it flat on the belt and make sure it stays where we want it to, we're getting some black tape. If you place it here and press it down, as you can see, it disappears, and then really apply some pressure so it's on tight. Come out the other side, cut it off, and it's secured, and it's invisible how it's secured. So we're not going to worry about the wires just yet. So the tricky bit is to get it positioned correctly. For the left belt box, you need to get a little bit of this Velcro underneath the clamps. That looks right. So a thing to note is that there's Velcro on the back of the clasp, and that should match up with the Velcro on the suit. However, they placed that Velcro way too low, because if you want to put the Velcro and the belt together, you have it in the wrong position. It will be way too low. So get the belt to just sit against the codpiece. Move the robe inward as much as possible. Get the codpiece up, the belt just above that, so it's just touching the codpiece. So this is a good time for some double-sided tape again. We want the robe to go as much against the chest box as we can. So this will do two things. It'll place the robe exactly where we want it, but it also makes it fall more natural. You don't want the robe to really stand off from the shoulder armor. You really want it to show the ridge of the shoulder armor. So, like that. Okay, so let's address the wiring coming from the boxes. I like to use a little trick with the thick double-sided tape to hold on to the fabric more. Place the place the wire on that, and then cover that up with the black insulation tape so there's nothing sticky going on. It also helps keep the belt in place. Okay, everything's looking good so far. Let's make sure everything is centered, close together, and then we can add the cape. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the differences between the Vader suits in the different movies, every single one of them is different, from episode 3 to Rogue One to episode 4, 5, and 6. One of the distinguishing factors for the New Hope look is that it's the only one where the armor is underneath the robe. Also, you see this chain, which is actually a bit of agricultural equipment to tie down trees, I think. It wasn't until Return of the Jedi that there was a hook added to the shoulder armor so you could see this thing. So for a New Hope, you don't want to show that. That always went underneath the helmet. Another nice bit of lore is that the hook was actually there because the guy in the Darth Vader suit, David Prowse, was complaining about the cape choking. As a 501st approved Vader, I can tell you that there's a significant amount of weight on that cape. And now we have a Darth Vader where the profile is actually accurate, because the arms can go straight down. So a little bit of futzing and it will be as close to movie accurate as we can get in a 1/6 scale figure, of course. So some futzing, and then I'll be taking some pictures in a proper setup. Well, there you go. I think he makes for a very imposing figure. I'm quite happy with the results. So thanks to everyone who stuck around this long. It's been a fun process and the feedback has been amazing, you guys. So let's look at the modifications. It's apples and oranges, this picture, I know, but it does show what's possible with this amazing figure if you take your time with it. I'm really happy with the results. So please support my work by sharing, liking, giving feedback, subscribing, and see you next time.